Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Talking Crap podcast. I'm your host, Lucas Jackson, joined by my lovely co-host, of course, Jaddy Josh Porter. Today, are you ready to raise some hell? Your enthusiasm for that. Your enthusiasm for that. My God. As we are going to be discussing the one and only Texas rattlesnake himself, the legacy, the life, the career, the retrospective of everything of Stone Cold Steve Austin. Joining us, though, is going to be someone who is a big Stone Cold fan, someone who's been a wrestling fan for many years, a very, very close friend of myself, and former DKW British champion and tag team champion DKW. We're going to be joined by the nemesis, Tony Kemp.
Before we're joined by Tony, can I just point something out? 3 episodes straight. We haven't missed a single week in 3 episodes.
Exactly.
In 3 weeks. And we've got more to come. We finished off a series.
Indeed. And before that, actually, we're going to get to later on. We've got an announcement before we end about the next series of Talking Crap. And let you leave in suspense. But like I said, we are now going to welcome our guest. Like I said, former DKW British champion and tag team champion, ladies and gentlemen, the nemesis, Tony Kemp. So we are joined here with the nemesis, Tony Kemp, and we're discussing all things Stone Cold Steve Austin. I know Tony's a big fan. I think obviously someone who we've touched upon another episode with Attitude Era, but we purposely avoided him as we wanted to do him justice. Obviously, he's one of the probably one of the 2 big names in wrestling history, I guess, along with Hulk Hogan. But first, we must turn to you, Porter. Is it time for the Pipe Bomb Promo Challenge?
The thing that everyone hates. So this is the season finale. So Tony, you are the last person to compete in the Pipe Bomb Promo Challenge this season. So your score now will determine if you go on to the season 2 finale or if you don't. You are on. So the way it's going to work is pretty simple. I'll give you the rules. So you'll have 1 minute to perform a promo on the topics that I give you. You'll be scored out of 10. 5 points by me, 5 points by Lucas. And season 2 has a bit of a twist in which we're doing. So we started this season on the brand split.
Yeah.
So we've split the brands. We've got Team Josh and Team Lucas. You are on Team Josh for this episode, as last week we had Taylor James on Team Lucas.
Right, cool.
So, do you understand the rules?
Yeah.
1 minute promo, topics I've given you. Pretty simple. Your 2 topics are, you will be facing one half of the Flying Scotsman, Stephen Doherty, if I've pronounced that correct, because I'm terrible with names. You'll be facing him at DKW Royal Rumble, and you'll be facing him in the main event for the British Heavyweight Championship, a title I know you've already held once or twice. Your 1 minute... when I get the timer up, because that's something I always forget. Your 1 minute starts now.
So, DK Rumble. I've got to fight one half of the Flying Scotsman. I don't know, I can never tell them apart. I know one's got a broken nose, the other one's going to end up with a broken nose by the end of the show, and that is Stephen Doherty. Mate, we've been up and down the road many times. It's fair to say it's coming up 17 years we've known each other. And in that 17 years, it's been very back and forth. But I'm telling you, that DKW British title is coming back with me. No matter what, it always has been, always will be. I'm bigger, I'm stronger, I'm tougher, and I'm going to kick your ass all the way back to Firth, Fife, wherever the fuck you come from, mate. All right? So, I'm telling you, you turn up, you're going to regret it. It's only going to end one or 2 ways. You're either going to need a small army, or you're going to need a body bag.
Okay.
Dead on 55 seconds. Look at that one. Very, very, very close to the 1 minute mark. I think we've only had one person hit dead on that 1 minute mark, and I believe that was in season 2. I'm trying to remember who it was. It was All Star Pro Wrestling's I can't remember.
I can't remember who it was now. I think we had someone get quite close though. Yeah.
He finished talking dead on 1 minute.
Didn't Vinny get close as well? I think Vinny got really close.
Vinny was
well.
like 58 or 59 at
Yeah.
one point.
It probably was Vinny that we're thinking of.
I'll put down the best times at the end of the episode. But for now, the scoring. Lucas, if you would like to go first.
Yeah, like it's weird because obviously no one really done this promo, especially like Tony, for ages now, and to rethink that part of your mind, isn't it? But obviously you and Steve, you and the Docket, go back, innit? Maybe for really old though. You said 17 years, almost 2 decades. But
well, just remember, like me and DKW are the exact same age, nearly.
Oh, stop!
Both started the same year.
Just stop. But yeah. Mainly because I'm a bit scared off that promo though. Yeah, I'm gonna go for 4 because everything was in there. All the information was in there, and the body bag line got me as well. I'm like, okay, yeah, Tony's back. He means business. So yeah, 4 for me.
I'm gonna have to go with the 4 as well, just because had you hit that 1 minute mark, it would have been a 5. But because you were just shy of 1 minute, I'm going with the 4.
But yeah, we're here to talk about Stone Cold. We begin with obviously how they almost, believe this or not, WWE obviously they've accused many times of missing the ball with people, and imagine this ball they dropped. So after Stone Cold had obviously been in the Hollywood Blondes, WCW, after he'd gone to ECW and shown that attitude, what did they do? They made him the ringmaster, and they put him with Ted DiBiase. And this was in the mid 90s, not even in the 80s, so that would fit. But it's one of those kind of what ifs that go through your mind. Like, what would we start with you, Tony. Like, what do you think they were thinking about, with giving him this kind of gimmick, to begin with?
To be brutally honest, right, I've watched Stone Cold wrestling matches to the point where I've got the DVD and I've watched it in depth. I've watched every match on it, and you sit there and you watch it, and I think what they were trying to do is, if you go back, and I mean you've got to go way back and start watching where Austin started, and when he was still Steve Williams, and when he was in WCW as part of the Hollywood Blondes, and there's a rare match on his DVD where it's him and Ric Flair versus Sting, and for the life of me, I can't think of who it is now.
Lex Luger?
No, I don't think it is Lex Luger. It was on Saturday night thing, and like literally it's in the middle of a recording studio, like they used to film Memphis Wrestling. And the match, if you watch it, right, like bear in mind this was like late 80s, sometime, I can't remember exactly, but Austin was a very, very good wrestler. Like before all the neck injury and everything like that, he was a very good wrestler. And I think that's when, like, obviously WCW went, oh, we can't do nothing. You ran your course, and they got rid of him. And he went to, like you said, ECW, and basically in ECW, Heyman just went, do what you want. And that's literally what he said. He turned around and went, do what you want. Go crack on, do what you want. Be done with it. And that's what he did. And I think they brought him in, seeing what he could do. And I think they wanted to do more of, because remember when he came in, WWE, WWF was still looking for what they wanted to do next. The whole 80s
new generation.
Yeah, had run its course, and they weren't quite sure where the new era was going to go with it. So is it going to go to, we're going to go Attitude Era like they did, or are we going to carry on with this? They were trying to find what they were trying to do. And the gimmick in itself was awful. I can't even lie. The gimmick was awful. But go back and watch the match. He's a decent wrestler when you get the chance to watch it. And I think, even though you look at the gimmick and you go, yeah, it was terrible, look at what it done. I think they used it to see what he could do, where they could take it, and was it going to work. Like, remember, I'm not being funny, Glenn Jacobs is another one. The awful crap he had to start off with.
Isaac Yankem
and stuff like that.
Fake Diesel.
Yeah. To Kane,
What was the Stormtrooper gimmick that he was given?
Or one we wore the helmet. Yeah, in
where he fell over.
Yeah.
No, you think of the shock? That's the Shockmaster.
The Shockmaster.
That's someone else.
WCW when he
was
burst.
that?
That's Tugboat, wasn't it? Tugboat.
Was it? Oh.
Yeah.
Not my era.
Yeah.
Yes, Tony, I think definitely I've always seen the gimmick as a very throwback gimmick though, the Ringmaster. Like it's very something that in the 80s they would have done and it would have really worked. But obviously at that time, especially after seeing what you could do, but it's probably the best example too, I think, of someone kind of outgrowing a gimmick. You know, like that gimmick was fine for someone who, again, lots of people took a payday in the WWF in the 90s and were happy to go there, take a payday for a few years, wrestle around the world, be on WrestleMania, whatever, and then leave. But to become obviously what Stone Cold would become afterwards, like it wasn't going to happen with the Ringmaster. I mean, Porter, I guess it's not your era too much, but are you familiar so much with the Ringmaster?
So there was a WWE video game recently, one of the 2K games, that did the entire story mode was based on Steve Austin.
Yeah.
So from what I remember, the Ringmaster was hardly the best choice for him.
You're basing that off video game. I love this. This is so funny.
Well, no, because it was historically accurate. Like,
yeah,
the story mode was entirely based on the history of Stone Cold. So it mentioned the Ringmaster here and there, but from what I remember, having it, I think had he not taken that gimmick, WWE wouldn't have kept him.
Yeah, it was at that period, wasn't it? Because even a lot of people when they went to WWE in those times, it was like you're given what you're given.
Yeah,
like you are nowadays to an extent. And obviously before people who we're going to get onto this a bit later, people that have obviously been influenced by Stone Cold, like CM Punk, etc., came in and said, actually, I'm not going to do that shit. I want to be me. But Stone Cold started that because his gimmick obviously was very much about being him. And I mean, we can't talk about Stone Cold without talking about two people. The first one we're going to mention is Vince McMahon. I think, the importance of a good villain here is so key because, I mean, obviously without Darth Vader, there's no Skywalker. And Vince McMahon really was that villain that Stone Cold, and I think the world kind of needed, because at that time where, that Stone Cold literally got to say, like, fuck you to his boss, like, every single week.
He got to punch his boss in the face multiple times.
Yeah. And again, going back, I guess Tony and I were similar age, at that time when things like that happened, it felt more real because obviously before Vince McMahon kind of was the owner, you had obviously your people like your Jack Tunney's who were presidents, who were formal suit people of at WrestleMania 6, I mean, the Warrior versus Hulk Hogan and, both titles on the line kind of thing. But you wasn't used to seeing the boss being kind of all over the program. But just how important then was, what do you think, Tony, Vince McMahon was to Stone Cold, success?
Oh, massively. Like you've already said, when that whole sort of angle kicked off, you've got to go back a little bit to get to that point anyway, because the whole the Steve Austin gimmick came in and he made it himself with the Jake the Snake King of the Ring win. I think that's what cemented Stone Cold as this is Stone Cold, this is what he is, just by his promos and stuff like that. And obviously it's like, well, where'd you go with this? And bearing in mind, once it come to this sort of once Vince was more on the screen and Vince is the horrible boss and Austin is the righteous guy that's had enough of his horrible boss. And let's be honest, everybody around the world, nobody can turn around and go, I've never once wanted to make my boss in the face. Personally, I've had it. I've wanted to make my boss in the face multiple times. I've even had one of my old bosses turn around and say that he turned around and was like, I'm literally petrified of you. I was like, what? Why? I've not done nothing wrong. So it's one of those things Vince cemented Stone Cold in a sense with this is what we need. And to be brutally honest, everybody loved it and everybody ate it up. That is what brought the Attitude Era in, because it's there's this, as they said, he was a redneck and he come from Texas and Texans that do this and the bigger and better in Texas and all this. And it's basically, he lived out everybody lived vicariously through him what they wanted to do in real life at some point, whether it be at the time or before. And that's the thing. It's like everybody wanted or wants to punch their boss in the face, or give them a stunner where they literally almost crush their throat and stuff like that. And if it wasn't for Vince and Austin, and like, let's be honest, like, knowing how much I do on it, like, Vince and Austin would sit down and they were like, right, okay, I want to do this and this, and like, how are we going to go from it? It got to a point that after a while, Austin was never given script or anything like that. Austin was told to just freeball it, go out. They've given the stuff they had to touch on, like don't forget you need to mention the Royal Rumble coming up, or WrestleMania, or this or that. And you need to, don't forget, you need to talk about the feud between you and Foley as well, and stuff like that, all while it's all going on. And he just went out and they give him free rein to literally do and say whatever he wanted. And I think that you've got to look at the creative side of it as well, as like who thought up some of the ideas they did, like Austin coming in a beer truck and spraying everybody with beer, like blowing out his own tonsils while trying to drink it. Like, whose idea was it? Vince's, was it Austin? Right, the creativeness they had at the time, like it funneled everything into where it needed to be to make it as big as it needed to be. And like, you can't turn around and sit there and say to people like, tell me your fondest, like what Stone Cold known for. And most people will be like, beating up his boss.
Yeah. Obviously, he's one of the two people. Obviously, we mention someone else in a bit. Come to you first, Porter. Though, like, same kind of thing. I guess, obviously, as a newer fan to it, though, obviously the Stone Cold Vince feud, did span kind of all. It's been like their whole kind of linked thing, I guess. Because even when Stone Cold came back for, like, I think it was Raw Homecoming, I think, when he stunned the whole McMahon family.
Everybody else,
that legendary moment. He just stunned it. Like, there was just periods where he just came out and stunned everyone, but definitely McMahon family. Even I think a couple of years ago on Raw anniversary, whatever, when he stunned Shane, I think was it Shane and Vince? I think he stunned, didn't it?
Yeah.
Raw 25, whatever it was. I think Raw 25. But Porter, like, I guess it must be, these moments must have been obviously played out to you. You'll obviously, we had a chance to watch them because they're so iconic, I guess, aren't they? And I guess I'll ask you at this point. I've asked you both, but Porter first, like, in terms of that relationship, though, it's something which, again, you saw be rehashed with like Triple H, Stan O'Brien, the whole authority angle. It was literally the same story, but with different people. CM Punk obviously went up against, the authority, quite a lot
like
too.
McMahon and John Cena kind of thing. Like,
even Owens and
CM
McMahon,
Punk, it was with CM Punk, it was less of he was going up against the authority and management, and more of he was just kind of going up against the face that is WWE.
Yeah. He went up the more corporate side, but he still kind of, and he learnt a lot from Stone Cold. Like,
the concept was there.
The pipe bomb promo, like we do, it came from, he was wearing a Stone Cold Steve Austin shirt, while doing that promo.
The logo at the pipe bomb promo challenge is the image taken from the pipe bomb promo.
Exactly,
that happened. But honestly, when it comes to Steve Austin, he's one of those people where there's so many defining moments in the Steve Austin 316 career that could be argued that was when he cemented his legacy. Like, my argument is that he wasn't really Steve Austin until that King of the Ring promo with the iconic phrase, Austin 316 says, "I just whooped your ass."
Yeah.
I think that promo is really what kind of got the ball rolling and really cemented him as a mainstay. I think had he not had that promo, maybe things would have been different. But the whole McMahon Austin Ministry storyline, that whole series of events, had that not happened, I think that would have possibly even changed wrestling as a whole for years to come.
Well, yeah, I mean, we touched on his promos, and I mention those now because Stone Cold promos are unique in the sense that he broke the mold. And Tony, you touched upon it, said he was given free rein to say what he wants, which is very rare anyway. But it's very rare that you're not even given instruction of to be good or bad. But essentially, he was doing a bad thing. There's a thing we've got to remember. He was doing a bad thing. He was, going up against the boss, and was, breaking rules. And even in terms of stuff like that, he would attack villains, without being provoked. Which again in wrestling, like he crossed those lines a lot. And before that, like you said, the other name, when it comes to we're thinking of our kind of mecca of wrestling, the other name that obviously comes up is Hulk Hogan. Without a shadow of a doubt. And Hulk Hogan was very much, when he was a good guy, he was a good guy. He was, he was to say your prayers, eat your vitamins, do the right thing. America loves you, blah blah. But then 10 years later, you got Stone Cold, who in promos would switch between the two, and that's what I think made it quite unique. And so it felt so natural because look, sometimes good people do bad things, sometimes bad people do good things, and sometimes you have those days, and Stone Cold was great at that. And I mean, there's so many iconic Stone Cold moments, also promos, like even after he kind of retired, like when he was a sheriff in the Code GM and stuff, like so much stuff that he got away with that I think I'd have to argue no performer's got away with since, like since the days of Stone Cold. But I mean, for me, I always remember the beer truck. That's the one for me. I'm always like that. To me, defines Stone Cold. Just the fact that he was able to get away with doing that on television. So I'll come to you first, Tony. Like, what's your kind of favourite? We can talk about moments first, then matches with Stone Cold, like promo or just antic he did, I guess.
It's an old one, isn't it? Like what one was the best one? Like you said, the beer truck is synonymous. Everybody remembers that. There's there's so like you got the moments like the buried alive, like and stuff like that, or you go and you like another moment. Just again, it falls into matches, but it's still a moment in history that I think once again falls back to the Vince McMahon Stone Cold is the Valentine's Day Massacre Steel Cage.
Oh,
when Paul White or Big Show broke through the thing and threw Austin into it and it swung open and he fell and Vince now screwed because Austin's going to the main event of WrestleMania and fight for the belt they didn't want him to do. And it's like there's so many moments that I think everybody's favourite's going to be the beer truck. Let's be honest, right?
Yeah, beer truck.
Thinking about it, like you go back, and you look at it, and like you got The Rock trying to hide behind the belt.
You got the Man family swimming.
They're swimming full of beer, like, and I'll tell you what, like, I can't even remember what year that was, but being a kid, I would have loved to be in there. Like everybody in that front row must have been stinking off by the end of it as well. Like, and that's what I mean.
Especially the announcers table as well.
Yeah, exactly.
They were right behind it.
But yeah, like to think he got away with so much of that kind of stuff as well, like even back then. And someone who obviously, you touched on there, took a lot of the brunt there was The Rock, who obviously after Vince McMahon was like it's weird to say that Vince McMahon was probably the main feud he had, but instead of wrestling, this is where Stone Cold's unique, and it's like a lot of his moments, like we say, his top iconic moments are moments, so they're not even matches or whatever. But in terms of match-wise, the chemistry he had with The Rock is up there with, I'd argue with some of the best that's ever been. 3 WrestleMania matches, obviously 2 of them being in the main event. The only match happened 3 times at Mania as well. So obviously that showed how much faith they had in the program. But they worked so well together, Stone Cold and The Rock. And it's so rare in a period outside the 80s to have a promotion have legitimately 2 worldwide, globally known superstars. Obviously, in the 80s, you had Hogan and Warrior and Savage. It was really spoiled, But obviously, it had been dipped since then. Like you said, the new generation we touched on earlier. Obviously, you had Bret Hart, obviously lead that. And obviously, before the Monday Night Wars, like weird periods of growth where they had Diesel, but they never really had like megastars. But Stone Cold and The Rock were megastars. Like everyone, it was that old playground argument. I know in my school, like of who do you prefer, Stone Cold, The Rock, and they are literally 2 of the biggest names ever to do it. But for me, I've always preferred their first WrestleMania match over their second one. What do you think, Tony? Like the WrestleMania 15 match, I've always preferred over just because I didn't like them turning Stone Cold heel. I just didn't like. That's the only bit that I'm always questioning about. I didn't like them turning him heel and him siding with Vince. It made, to me, it was like, no.
See, in all honesty, like I don't think I could pick a favourite out of the three.
Oh,
It's kind of bittersweet for me because I know full well from reading his book, watching documentaries and stuff, that the final WrestleMania match between him and The Rock, everybody knew that was his last match, but he didn't make it public.
Mm.
And it's kind of bittersweet because you watch it and nobody knew at the time. They see the match and thought, oh, there's going to be something else go on. And upon speaking to, like, not speaking to, but watching a conversation between the two of them, and like after the match, like The Rock pins him and rolls over and says, like, well done, brother, and whatnot. And The Rock was the only person that knew that Austin was done. And it all, like, obviously, all because of his neck. And when you compare the first match to the second match to the third match, you can see how much Austin was limited each time they went in. Like,
yeah.
And talking to The Rock and Austin, and like, I remember I was watching the other day. Oh, what was it? It was a throwback Raw to when the invasion happened, right? And it was literally the Monday Night Raw before they had the Survivor Series, and it was Team WWE, WWF versus Team ECW, WCW, and Austin and Kurt. And yeah, so Austin and Kurt had gone over to the Alliance. Austin was WWF champion. The Rock was WCW champion. And Mick Foley come out and he's like, oh yeah, the last thing I'm going to do is commissioner. Blah, blah, blah. We're going to put all the titles into one once it's all over and all whatnot. Right? And Austin and Rock on both on that show, both wrestled in their clothes. Neither of them wore wrestling gear. And the last 10 minutes of the whole show is Austin and Rock sitting there having an argument where they, right? And the whole 10 minutes is them snatching the same microphone off each other, right? And sitting there and watching it, I'm laughing because I thought it was brilliant because every time Austin snatched the microphone off the Rock or Rock snatched the microphone back, everyone's like, they're gonna go, they're gonna have a fight, and they didn't. And that's what I mean. It's like that the energy, the minute they're both in the ring, was just like they say, when you come to wrestling and you want to be a wrestler and it's you turn up to 100.
Yeah.
You put them two in the ring and the energy, no matter what, when, whatever, just turns up to 100. And it's amazing. Like they barely said anything to each other. Like it's just like, don't you snatch the microphone off me, mate. Don't you snatch the microphone off me. And then they're standing there and they're face to face and you're waiting for them to each other. And no, they never did for 10 whole minutes. Like you can't, you couldn't do that now. People would be bored after that. They're like, just staring at each other. But back then, everybody bit into it. And it was just phenomenal. And that's what I mean. Like it doesn't matter. Like even when they all turned up, you had him, Hogan, and The Rock at WrestleMania a couple of years ago, right? The electricity was turned up to 100 just because Austin and The Rock both turned up. Like, don't get me wrong, yeah, Hulk Hogan, everybody listed up Hulk Hogan, that. And to be brutally honest now, I think Hulk Hogan's that much too far gone. Like, people see him and they say, oh, yeah, it's Hulk Hogan, and everybody gets happy that you put him in a ring with Stone Cold and The Rock, and he's no one, in my honest opinion. Like, they overshadowed.
Controversial.
In my honest opinion, you look at that, right, and tell me who stood out more. Hogan, Austin, or The Rock. Right, and Austin and The Rock straight away, right? And it's not because that was my era. Don't get me wrong. I love when Hogan come back during the last little bit of the Attitude Era and he come back. Yeah, I thought it was amazing. But his persona isn't as big as them. Like, Hogan can lift the atmosphere and stuff, but it's just them two together. Like, and that's what I mean. Every moment with them together is like a whole WrestleMania moment. I don't, honest to God, I don't think I could say which one was the better match because they all had certain things. And like you saying, like, oh, at the end of WrestleMania 2 when they turned him heel and they had him join with Vince McMahon, I think that's what made the end of it, part of it. Like, very differing opinions. I honestly think that him signing with McMahon, nobody see it coming. Like, I didn't as a kid, right? And I think that's the whole thing. Like, everybody goes, oh my God, why did he do it? He's just made a deal with the devil. But how long did it last? Not very long. And what happened?
Well, yeah, because it was
Mate,
obviously it was obviously a logistic reason because The Rock was obviously going off to film Scorpion King, and so they needed obviously someone to fill his spot, and so they went with Stone Cold. And obviously that's something which at the time watching you didn't know. This is again the joy of watching wrestling back then was obviously you didn't know what was going to happen. Obviously now, obviously when you read more into it, you're like, okay, I'm coming to you, Porter. Then so like. You know, we're talking about Stone Cold and about his feud with The Rock. You know, can you think of like another, can you think of another kind of rivalry that could have like 3 matches like now at Mania? Like, I don't think we can.
There isn't one. There honestly isn't one. Like
that to me is the biggest sign that this program was.
I can possibly think of an individual that could go with 3 matches in a row at Mania main event, but I can't think of anyone that could have a rivalry that would span 3 WrestleManias. But you were talking about like your favorites and what you think the best matches of theirs are. I can't say a definitive best, but I could say my favorite one, probably their match at Mania 17.
That's when I get brought up a lot more often.
Simply because Mania 17 is recognized as arguably the best WrestleMania. Arguably, of course. Like, there are many people that say it isn't, but for me, WrestleMania 17 is the best WrestleMania of all time so far. And I think having them headline that was possibly the best WrestleMania main event so far as well.
The package of that
in my mind,
the video package,
easily. But there isn't a single rivalry going on right now that could top The Rock and Austin. It's one of those iconic things that's going to stick in history forever.
Yeah, no, I agree. The thing is, interestingly, obviously, Hogan. I think obviously his appeal waned. Primarily because of his personal actions, let's be real. But I think also, like, in terms of the different eras mixing, he's not really ever shown interest in the new era of stuff. So obviously that's what makes it a bit difficult, sore thumb for me anyway. The thing is, what's interesting in this, and obviously I said this, I think, last night to you guys, like, so Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins' main event runs have now eclipsed that of Stone Cold and The Rock.
Well,
as
eclipsed.
Yeah.
They've had more
in terms of time and in terms of longevity. They've both been, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as but definitely with Roman Reigns anyway, they've both been main eventers for over 6 years now. And obviously the Stone Cold main run we're talking about was 97 to 2002 and a bit, because he did the whole took his ball and went home for a little bit in 2002. Then when he came back, he only had the match with The Rock, didn't he? I think he had a couple of matches in early 2003, retired against The Rock in like March 2003. So, we're talking 4.5, 5 years, plus, with injuries and stuff. And obviously there's been a lot of talk about, definitely, I think it's about 10 years ago now, when the last talk about it was when he did say that his neck felt better and that he would be up for doing, more matches. But for our final kind of question then, has that ship sailed? If it has, then is there anyone who you would have, in the last, let's say, 15 years, that you would like to see him face? Start with you, Tony.
Well, the whole his neck feels better. Yeah, his neck does feel better, but what you've got to remember now is Austin is 50-something years old. And let's be honest, there's not very many. Like Austin said for a very long time, even after a couple of years of not wrestling, the rest done him a world of good.
Yeah.
But if he was to come back, he's still limited by the moves that he can do. And how
to stop someone like Goldberg though? How to stop Goldberg?
But then saying that, Goldberg didn't break his neck as badly as what Austin did. Remember, Austin was paralysed for a good few minutes till he had full feeling back, and then he still couldn't stand properly. But yeah, the sheer amount of like surgeries he's had. Austin said he could probably have one more match, but he won't do it as far as he's concerned, just because the sheer fact that he knows it ain't going to be what everybody wants, and he doesn't want people to remember him in that state. He wants them to remember him the WrestleMania where he fought The Rock, was it 17 where he won, where he lost, and he bowed out graciously. And he was done.
He did the right thing. Obviously, Stone Cold gets there's some criticism that Stone was Stone Cold, definitely in the kind of 2001, 2002 kind of period where it was very clear that he was unhappy about not getting a main spot on WrestleMania 18. He was a foul kind of presence throughout that entire kind of mid-period of 2002 before he took his ball and went home. And yes, I'm with him on the side of that. He should have refused, like he did, to lose to Lesnar, obviously on TV for free. Like that literally makes a lot of sense. But, you know, he was already kind of tired and done by it. I've always felt that, like, because obviously I was just watching old Rumbles and seeing Andre the Giant wrestling in like 1990, 1991 when he can, obviously he was limited already, Andre, because of his size and because of his health. But you're looking at him going in 91, 92, like the guy can't, he can barely move his arm above his, you know what I mean, to do a clothesline or something. And it just looks, it isn't befitting of that same image of the guy who got body slammed by Hogan a few years ago. You know, it's like, and the same with Stone Cold, I'm thinking like you're saying there, like, you know, he was able to get through a really solid match with The Rock at Mania in 2003. By the time you're in the late 2000s, like, I don't see him getting through like anything half as decent, you know, with anyone else. Like, I think the only one I would have been conscious of seeing, it maybe is him against CM Punk, because I thought that wasn't happen at one point, and I love Punk, I love Stone Cold, so I thought, okay, I'll be down for something like that. But I think he's done the right thing, kind of not doing it. What about you, Potter?
I agree. I think what he's done is correct in the sense of, like, I think he stepped out at the best time he could. Like, he was at a high point in his career, and I don't think it could have gotten any better from there. Like, he's going to be in the history books of wrestling forever now. There's no
I guess
way
he would be anyway. Like, you know.
But I think after that, there was no way he was topping what he'd already done. Like, I think that was it in the terms of, to be fair, in the terms of wrestling in that era. I think that was the height of wrestling then. Like, as much as I'd like to see him take on CM Punk or even Kevin Owens, to be fair, either of those, as much as I'd like to see that happen, I don't see it happening. But that is kind of a dream match of mine. Is CM Punk v Austin or Austin v Kevin Owens?
You see, the thing is, I think there's only a handful of names that would be big enough to attract him back. You know, there was a period a few years ago when The Rock was obviously still kind of showing up in WWE. Were you thinking, could they do a fourth? You know, could they do that? You know, and then obviously when the Saudi deal started as well, Stone Cold and Cena as well was another one which, you know, could have happened at one point. It was on the table at one point. I think that was back in 2007 or 2008, around that kind of time when it was mentioned. But again, there was no interest from Stone Cold at that point.
I'd rather CM Punk than John Cena.
Well, the thing is, Cena would make, you could argue Cena would make better sense because obviously Cena represents like the system and he'd be that safe kind of hands, I guess. That's
it would make better sense, but it wouldn't make a better match necessarily.
And also, in my head anyway, the cool kind of spot would be Cena going for the AA, and if he could do it, I don't know if he could find a way to get in the stunner from the AA. I think it could be quite phenomenal. But again,
I think it's possible. I've seen people pull off a stunner from a AA.
But I think
whether Stone Cold could do it or not is a different story.
The only honest way he'd be able to pull off a stunner from an AA is to slide down the back. It's the only way he'd do it. But in all honesty, I don't think Cena would be a good option. If someone turned around to me and went Stone Cold versus Cena, I wouldn't watch it. I probably would watch it, that's a lie, but I
wouldn't be as into it.
I'd argue the interest has gone now because you'll know that with respect, it's just like a money match. You know, it's just a money match. And there's nothing at stake because obviously Cena, they've both got careers outside of wrestling. They don't really care about it. Well, not don't care, but they don't. There's no, like, they're not going to appear next week on Raw. But I think with Cena in 2008, you know, when he was hot as anything.
When he was really the face of the company.
Year, you know, I think that there could have been something, but it didn't happen. And I think rightfully so because it is that tough one to decide. Like, and lots of wrestlers obviously outstay their welcome. And something I'm glad that Stone Cold didn't do, and I guess he didn't need to do. He didn't obviously end up, you know, I know you love them, but end up in the world of Impact Wrestling or going to another promotion or whatever. He just kind of said, look, that's it. I've had Mania.
I honestly don't think Stone Cold would have fit in any other company. Like, as much as I love Impact, I don't think he would have fit there.
The thing is with Stone Cold, it's if he's in your promotion, he's your top guy. Like, that's the thing. There's no, we're gonna put Jeff Jarrett over you, but we're gonna put this person over you. It's like, no, if you've got Stone Cold Steve Austin, he's your top guy.
Impact is not the company that for people like Stone Cold.
Because he did nothing else. The thing is, you say that because it wasn't the promotion, it was Ric Flair or Mick Foley, but they went there. They went there after they retired. You know,
yeah, but the star power they brought to it, I don't think benefited as much as people say it did.
To be brutally honest, like touching on the subject of Impact, and you're saying about Mick Foley and Ric Flair going there and stuff like that when their careers were over, I think that Impact, in my personal opinion, don't get me wrong, when Impact first started, I used to watch it when it was back in like a hall and whatnot, and you had the likes of Ron Killings and CM Punk and stuff like that.
The NWA TNA days.
Yeah, the Asylum and that, right? And then when, like, don't get me wrong, like Christian left WWE and they brought him in, they turned Christian into what I think he tried to do in WWE and WWE didn't help him do it.
They turned him into a main eventer that he should have been.
Yeah. And I think they helped WWE see what they were missing with Christian in a sense and stuff like that. But when they started bringing in, like, don't get me wrong, bringing in the likes of Scott Steiner and Nash and Hall and Hogan and they just literally filled it and they lost, in my honest opinion, like they lost what they had at the start. Like, don't get me wrong, Jarrett called everybody in and Jarrett was, oh yeah, he's the top guy and you have to beat Jarrett to make your name. But I honestly think they flooded it with too much of WWE's old wrestling.
I think having all those names there was cool, but they didn't need it. Like, TNA was famous for the X division and its no limits personality. So
the younger talent. Okay.
I think bringing in someone like Austin would have killed off the X division.
I honestly agree with you. If you brought in Austin, I think bringing in Hogan and Flair and Nash and that killed off the X division.
I think that they had some good names like Sting and Angle, people that could still honestly go in the ring. But I think bringing in Austin, especially around that time period, would have not killed off Austin as much, but I think his legacy would have been tarnished. And so would TNA's.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like
absolutely. Because I can't look at Ric Flair the same way. I can't. The thing is, the match at Mania 24 against Shawn Michaels, phenomenal match, fantastic story, and you know, I still get somewhat emotional watching it now because it's like really good storytelling with WWE. But then you just reminded by the fact he literally wrestled an Impact like 2 years later, and I can't buy into this anymore. And I think the same way here, where that amazing story you told obviously earlier, Tony, about obviously The Rock and Stone Cold at Mania 19, and then that being their kind of thing, they didn't know. So that gets ruined if Stone Cold now wrestles again because it's like, well, now it's something else. But look, Stone Cold, one of those which obviously so much we didn't even touch upon, during this, like when he was a sheriff, when he was a co-GM. Obviously, he's a podcast and television host now. Again, so he's got other stuff outside of wrestling, which obviously I guess, he doesn't need to. But look, thanks for joining us, Tony. I think we're definitely going to obviously have to probably do another Attitude themed episode very soon because so much we didn't touch upon with this. Thanks for joining us. And next week we'll be joined by Mitch Baxter, and he'll be helping us discuss big men in wrestling, so your Van Vaders, your Big Shows, your Undertaker, Kanes, and much, much more.
He'll also be helping us bring in the new season.
Indeed, as season 3 is starting next week. That was our announcement we're going to take. But until then, I've been Lucas Jackson, joined by Jay Josh. Thanks to our guest, Tony Kemp, and we'll see you very, very soon. Bye-bye.
Take it easy.